Most fintech startups don't fail to get eyes on them because their product is bad, but because they can't clearly get the market to understand what exactly they do. And unfortunately, this can also happen to products that are genuinely good. By the end of this video, you're going to understand how positioning quietly shapes the audience's perception and level of trust in you, long before marketing or other distribution tactics have the chance to even play out. Hi, I'm Ramsey, and I support 7, 8, 9, and 10-figure fintech and Web3 startups in their go-to-market, storytelling, and marketing, helping drive billions in enterprise value. And in this video, I'm going to break down how positioning works for fintech startups, what it's doing behind the scenes, why it matters more than most teams realize, and how you can start to take control of yours. There's a big misconception that most founders I speak to have around their positioning. Typically, they think positioning is just messaging. It's a zingy tagline, it's your brand voice, or just a slide deck that they can fix later. But that's not how it works. Positioning doesn't live in your brand guidelines, your product docs, or your FAQs. It lives in the market's perception of you. And if you don't deliberately shape that perception, the market will do it for you. Usually by oversimplifying, misplacing, or comparing you to the wrong thing entirely. And perception is reality, so it's your job to engineer yours. Now, at its core, positioning is how the market perceives you relative to other alternatives or competitors. And it answers a few silent questions that your audience might be asking without even realizing. And these questions are as follows. What product category is this in? Why should I care? What does it mean for me? And when would I choose this over something else? That's it. Positioning is nothing more than a logical frame. It doesn't take storytelling into account just yet. But here's the important part. Your positioning becomes the lens that people see your product through. It's how everything else is really interpreted, from, again, your product to your pricing to even the content that you create. Everything is encompassed through the lens that you provide the market to look at your product through. And that's why it's so important to shape that yourself. And this matters even more in fintech. Fintech is a very competitive industry. It's a very competitive sector with products that span a very wide breadth and also go very deep within each individual category. Products can be complex and require a lot of trust to make conversions, especially as we're dealing with money and sometimes quite a lot of it. And because fintech products can be more complex, some products may seem abstract from the outside, and buyers tend to use shortcuts to make sense of new products so they can understand them better. They might look for things such as simple mental models, clear value propositions, known brands for association, and familiar sets of products that they can map any new products to so they can understand them better. And again, that's them getting a perception of a product to make sense of it, which is why it's important for you to shape that perception, to make it as easy as possible for people to understand and trust your brand and product. When your positioning is weak, people become skeptical. They don't understand what you do, and they're less likely to want to take a conversation further and interact with your product or even interact with your sales team. So it's really important that we have a strong positioning, because ultimately we can build trust. If people see that this product is positioned in a way that shows them it's the right solution for them off the bat, they're much more likely to trust it and therefore have those conversations and more likely to convert. Ultimately, it's about building trust with buyers, building their confidence, and making it easy for them to move themselves down the sales funnel and understand that this is the right solution for them. Now, whether you think about them or not, there are 4 factors that define your positioning in the market. So let's have a look at what these are. Now, the first one is who. Who are you actually building for? When talking about their products, lots of fintech teams stay very broad with their positioning. They seem to be afraid to call out a specific group of buyers or customers, and they end up saying things like banking for businesses or accounting for everyone or whatever you'd like, product for very broad audience segment. Now, they do this because they don't want to exclude anyone. If their product is suitable or valuable to a large set of audience, they feel like keeping it broad allows them to catch more people. But the reality is it's not giving you flexibility, it's giving the audience uncertainty. When I hear there's a banking solution for businesses, I don't know if that's suitable for my business. But if I was saying that there's a banking solution suitable for businesses with under 30 employees, that's a lot more familiar for my situation, and therefore I'm much more likely to go ahead and engage with that brand because they're calling out my ICP specifically. And I like to say that it's better to be obvious to a small group of people than optional to a large group of people. Now, the second pillar of strong positioning is the question of what. What actually are you? Now, internally, your product may be a modular API-first financial orchestration layer with multi-rail settlement support. Sounds very cool, very fancy, very complicated. But if that's how you're describing your product to the buyers, it's just going to go through one ear and out the other, because this doesn't really mean much to them in its current form. All the market wants to really know is what is it in very plain and simple terms so they can understand if it's useful for them. The best way to do this is to turn it from something very complex into something familiar. And one way to do this is to anchor your positioning to what your system replaces, what it enables, and what benefits that has. Now, the type of audience that you're selling to will help you outline the language that you need to use, but the bottom line is, if you can't explain your product in one simple sentence, the market will do that for you. And it's usually worse than what you could have chosen. And even more so, you will lose control of the framing and the perception. Now, the third pillar is why. Why does our product matter in the first place? Now, building on from our previous example, what do you expect to see when a team describes their product as a API-first, modular, orchestration, blah, blah, blah? It's usually a long list of features that don't really help you understand why this product is going to be the best solution for you. Things like real-time transaction monitoring, multi-currency wallets, reconciliation automation. Like, these are all things that are great features, sure, but people need to understand why they should care about those. They might all be relevant and they should definitely be on your product page, but again, none of them explain why people should care. And in the buyer's head, every feature that you list is triggering a question, and that question is, so what? So what, so what, so what? Why should I care about this? To build strong positioning, you need to answer this question before buyers even ask it. Don't just list the product features, connect them to a benefit, and then connect that to something they deeply care about, which is sometimes what I call selling the holiday. Let's take a quick example. If I have a trading tool that has some set of features, for example, optimized database routing, that's even a real thing. If I have that feature and that helps me go faster, that's not where the benefit ends. If I can trade faster, I can make more money, and that's the holiday that I'm selling. So I have a feature that connects to a benefit that connects to something that the end user truly cares about. Database optimization helps the product to be faster than the rest, which helps you make more money. And now moving on to our final pillar, why you? It's really important that people understand why you are the right solution for them. This is where a lot of teams end up fading away. They become one product in a sea of many, many others, and they do this in two key ways. The first is by saying that they're better than their competitors in every other way, which is very hard to believe, especially for new products that haven't been stress tested by the market. And the second is being afraid to say that they're better than their competitors in any way, which doesn't really give anyone a reason to try their products. To have any sort of competitive advantage, you need to be better than some of your competitors in some way, shape, or form. If you objectively aren't, then you have a product development problem that you need to fix before you go on to even marketing your solution. So fix that and then come back to this video. On the other hand, if you're saying that you're better than your competitors in every other way without proving it, that's not much better. The fintech audience across the board, from B2C to B2B to B2G, is quite skeptical. Again, we're dealing with money here, and people are very protective of their money. So for someone who's never heard of you before, you're going to have quite a hard time convincing them that you are better than your competitors in every other way. So what's the middle ground here? Well, I suggest choosing one or two things that matter most to your audience and try be better or compete on those things and let everything else be secondary. Be hyper competitive in one area or two areas, then try be averagely good at everything else. One or two real differentiators is better than 10 vague product features every single time. So now we've covered all four forces that shape brand positioning. And don't think that ignoring them is going to make them just go away. It will just make it harder for you to compete over time. So how do you win the positioning battle in the fintech world? Well, if you zoom out, fintech startups tend to solidify their positioning in one of two ways. And one of them we briefly covered in the last section of this video. The first way is to reframe an existing category and dominate it on your terms. Now, as an example, imagine a crowded payment space where everyone is talking about compliance and infrastructure and robustness and safety, things that a lot of people do care about. There's no discounting that. One company might come in to position itself entirely around speed to launch as opposed to those other factors. And that means that people who want to use their solution can hit the market faster. Now, that is also a very competitive and compelling use case and product proposition, where you're now reframing the value proposition around an entirely new standard that people should be striving for. A pretty good example of this is if you're ever in crypto, then you would know about Solana. And at the time of Solana's launch, the biggest blockchain for the same purpose would have been Ethereum. Ethereum is very much focused on general expressivity of builders, so they can kind of build whatever they want. But Solana said, screw that, we don't care about that. We don't care about the decentralization as much as you do. We care about speed. So they compete in the same category of product, but they benefit and they work on different standards. So people who are more in tune with wanting a faster product will go to Solana. People who care more about the decentralization or robustness of a network will go to Ethereum. So same category, different battles being held. And you're not saying that the other points are bad, you're just saying that there's another dimension that you should be focusing on and is a core part of what your decision should be. And ultimately, that's what matters right now. Now, this path works great when a category is already existing and established. It works great when the buyers truly understand the problem at hand. And it also works where competitors might be a little bit slow or lazy. So if you're in a startup in an industry where everyone is a very big incumbent, then maybe it's a good opportunity for you to kind of take that new dimension and make that your positioning so you can own that little subsection of the market. Now, the second path to positioning is creating a completely new category. If you're a bit more of an out-of-the-box solution or out-of-the-box person, then the second option might be a little bit more up your alley, and that is creating your own new category of product. Now, this is considerably harder, but it can be way more powerful. There is not really necessarily a best time and a place for this. It really just depends on the market circumstances and the context of your business. Instead of competing head to head with other people, you're basically saying, well, actually, we're not really the same type of product. And a good example of this was the neobank versus traditional bank. Both are banks, but the neobanks decided that we're not going to compete with traditional banks. We're going to have our own category with our own kind of things that we want to compete on that allows us to position ourselves differently from a traditional high street bank. Now, this often shows up in new language, new mental models, and a reframed problem that the market hasn't particularly named yet or hasn't really been exposed to as much yet. Now, the only downsides really are early on, you'll have what I call education debt. If it's a new category, it requires more education because you have to make sure that people can come with their existing mental models and understand exactly what you're doing differently. And this is pretty difficult, but this also depends on how far out of the existing mental model your new product category is. But if it works, it will work very well. You'll have all the attention in your new category. You'll have all the mind share for that type of product, and that will allow you to be synonymous with the category itself, which is always a very big win, especially in the long run. Whatever path you choose, the worst thing you can do is do them both halfway. You either commit to building a new category, or you anchor yourself to an existing category and compete on different standards. Doing both is very hard and probably confusing in terms of how you're going to be putting across your messaging and your communications to the audience. When your positioning is clear and people can understand the value proposition of your product properly, something very interesting happens. Marketing gets simpler, cheaper, and more effective. Sales cycles get much shorter. Trust and buyer confidence builds a lot faster. Word of mouth spreads a lot faster, and growth feels more stable and predictable. And when your positioning is weak, the opposite is of course true. And most teams try to compensate with volume, which of course you should be doing a lot of volume in anything that you're doing. But even if you put out more content, push more features, and put more efforts into everything that you're doing, if the underlying problem is still there, that your product is not communicated clearly and your positioning is weak, nothing will really change. Your audience still does not understand clearly what you do and why it's beneficial for them to use your product. So the big takeaway here is this: positioning doesn't just work because you'll know what to say. It works because it shapes how people interpret everything that you do. Remember, you're giving them the glasses they should be looking at your product through and shaping their perception of your whole brand and product. And if it feels hard right now, it should be. That's very normal. The process takes time, testing, and iteration. but it'll save you much more in the long run, as it'll be easier for the market to understand what you do and why they should choose you over any competitors. If this was useful or valuable, it really helps to give this a like, a comment, and subscribe to the channel, and maybe even share with a founder who's dealing with this right now. And if you want help applying this to your own product and brand, you can reach out using the link in the description below.